Welcome, everyone, to another one of our Alumni in Management series. We are joined tonight by Brett Stevens, who's going to tell us a little bit about his Monmouth story and then how he got involved in a career in sustainability and where that career has taken him. And then, of course, he'll have some advice for all of you who are listening and anyone who listens to this in the future when we post it up on the internet. To get us started, though, I want to share a brief video from the Dean of the Business School, Raj Devasagayam.
Welcome to the Alumni in Management series. This is a series of one-on-one conversations that's designed to bring in the expertise and experience of emergent leaders to our classrooms. We in the Leon Hess Business School believe that your learning outside the classroom is truly essential to supplement our learning inside the classroom. As you listen to the conversation this evening, focus in and relate it to your own experience, your own professional experience from jobs, from internships, and see what you can learn that would be of help to you right away, in the near future as you approach the job market, and in the distant future as you craft your own leadership path. My thanks to Professor Palazzolo for organizing this event. I must mention that he's a proud alum of Monmouth himself. My thanks also to the alumni for bringing in their expertise and experience, sharing it with us so generously, and most of all, for the time and effort you're putting in to giving back something to our institution. Thank you. Finally, I thank each one of you for attending. I hope you learned something new today that you can apply beginning tomorrow. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dean Devasagayam. And for those of you who have been on the Alumni and Management series before, you know that we ask each of our guests to provide us with their own video introduction, and Brett has been good enough to do that. So here is Brett's introduction for you all to watch.
Hi everyone, my name is Brett Stevens, and I graduated from Monmouth University in the spring of 2008. When I was an undergraduate at Monmouth, I majored in business administration with a concentration in management. I was always curious about the inner workings of a deal, how businesses made money and everything like that, and that started my pursuit of a business degree. During my undergraduate years, I was an avid amateur golfer and also was an active member of Sigma Pi fraternity. To say that Greek life totally changed my social trajectory would be an understatement. It gave me all kinds of exposure to different life situations and helped me form bonds with guys that I'm still close with today. I'm originally from Northeast Philadelphia, but I grew up in South Jersey. I went to Triton Regional High School in Runnymede, New Jersey, and then found my way to Monmouth. After I graduated, I immediately entered the workforce and took my first job with a medical education company. Not exactly my passion, but it was a dependable job right out of school. It wasn't until about a year into my professional life that I changed companies and found my real passion, which is managing waste for some of the biggest manufacturing companies and brands in the world. I'll get into more of that during my presentation in the Alumni in Management series. Can't wait to see you all on April 13th.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Brett. Maybe you want to take a moment or two and add any other introductory thoughts, comments that maybe you forgot in your introduction.
Yeah, sure. So as you all heard, I've been in the professional workforce for quite a while now. I'm 36 years old at present, about to be 37. So nearly 15 years into the workforce already. Hard to believe. if you think time goes fast in college, wait until you have a real job and bills are coming. Time flies. So yeah, my background is in sustainability. I currently work for a company called Covanta. It's a waste to energy business that instead of taking waste to a landfill, my company manages facilities that effectively incinerate waste and recover steam energy that they can sell back to the local power grid. Part of my role with Covanta is managing our third-party solutions group, which, in layman's terms is really using subcontractor work to deal with our customers' wastes. So for instance, if we have a customer on the West Coast in an area where Covanta doesn't manage a facility, my role is to subcontract that work out to capable vendors that I have vetted, that I know and trust over my time in the recycling waste management world. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So let's go back. Let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned on the video introduction where it is you went to high school. Well, tell us more about your personal background. Let's dig into that for a few minutes.
Sure.
Tell us where you grew up and some influences on you early on.
Sure. So I grew up in an Irish Catholic family in Northeast Philadelphia, born in 1986. So I was a 90s baby, really growing up. Back in the days when, kids did not use computers and play video games all day, but rather would be kind of out knocking on doors to play with their friends and play sports outside. Those were the glory days before technology ruined it all. But during my time growing up, I was an avid athlete. I like to play all sports, all seasons. Up through high school, I played multiple sports. A big part of my social life was being on sports teams, having a lot of friends that played the same sports as me. I have two parents that are still together, a younger brother as well. So I had a tight-knit family growing up, the type of family that sat down and had dinner every night. So I was very lucky and fortunate to have that structure in my life growing up. I saw the value of hard work. My dad came and went to work every day and, basically came home as dinner was ready and spent a couple hours with us, and then we'd go to bed and do it all over the next day. So I understand what it means to provide for a family and be able to go to work every day, work hard, and be dependable. So the work ethic that I've always had was instilled in me in a young age. And I probably didn't take that seriously until I got into high school, when I knew that my grades would matter and that ultimately I wanted to go to a good school, get myself a good job, and be able to be that provider myself. So that's just a little bit about my kind of family life, my background in the early years. Anything else specific you'd like to know?
No, but you bring up that you made sure you wanted to go to a good school, and you got yourself to Monmouth, which is a pretty good school. So tell us, why'd you go to Monmouth University?
Yeah, so again, I grew up in South Jersey. I have a lot of family, not just my immediate family, but cousins, grandparents, et cetera, that all live sort of within an hour radius in South Jersey. And so I was never the type that was really looking to go away, kind of across the country or another state for school. So when I was applying for colleges, I was basically looking New Jersey, maybe I think I applied to Delaware. But I was looking at schools like TCNJ, Monmouth, Rutgers, Fairleigh Dickinson, schools of small sizes and schools of very large sizes, and went on tours at multiple schools. And right away, I fell in love with the beauty of Monmouth. I really liked that it was small, but not too small. It felt sprawling when you walk around campus for the first time, but 3,000 or 4,000 undergrad is small by today's standards. So after visiting places like Rutgers, where you're taking buses and crossing highways to get to different parts of campus, I knew that I wanted to be at a university that was walkable, where I could walk from my dorm to my class and back home and have meals on campus and walk there. So just, by default, I started leaning toward that smaller type of college atmosphere. And before I made the decision that I wanted to go to Monmouth, I started thinking I wanted to go to one of those smaller schools. I knew that I was interested in business. And when I came for my tour of Monmouth, it was very clear to me that it was a good and growing business school. And that's where I wanted to get my degree from. So at the time, I don't know if things have changed, but at the time, Monmouth was one of the universities that did not require you to submit an essay as part of your application, which also helped. I don't know if that's changed today, but I kid. But I do like the idea that Monmouth was very close to the shore, a mile from the beach. As a kid that went to the Jersey Shore during summers growing up, Sea Isle, Ocean City, Atlantic City, I love my time by the beach. And so first time I visited Monmouth, I fell in love, and that was it.
Right. I think many of our students have experienced that same falling in love with Monmouth when they were doing their tours or just visiting friends and family who may have attended the school before them. So that's a very common Monmouth story, and I'm glad to hear it's part of yours as well, Brett. I want to move a little bit now into the professional world. So take us along the path of your career, starting with let's start with internships that maybe you had while you were an undergraduate. I have to tell you, one of the most common questions I get from my students is, are there any internships available? Can you help connect me to different places? Did you have any internships when you were an undergraduate?
I did have a small internship with a nonprofit organization in Asbury Park for a bit. What was the name of that company? I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but I did some office and administrative work for a company that was, 10, 15-minute drive away from campus, a couple days a week, a few hours a week. Not a very difficult job, but it was a way to make some, fun money for going out on a Friday night and having a meal outside of campus, for instance. I'd say the more meaningful internships and college age type jobs that I had were not really office jobs, not really even business related. As I mentioned in my intro, I'm an avid golfer. I played high school golf, got a partial scholarship to play in college, and ultimately ended up not being a college golf athlete, but I still play very much competitively. And in my high school years, junior and senior year, during the summer months between years, and even a few years into my young professional life, my favorite, still to this day, job was caddying at a golf club, a private country club. Now, that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, obviously, but at that age, I knew that, I've heard it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so making connections with people that are established in the business world across a variety of fields was really helpful to me, understanding different perspectives on business. I was lucky enough to caddy for some very wealthy, very well-connected people that I still keep in touch with to this day. But that job where I worked as a caddy at Pine Valley Golf Club was one of the most rewarding jobs that taught me social skills and soft skills that you will never learn in the classroom. Those are, things like when you're greeting somebody for the first time, look them in the eye, shake their hand, make sure you catch their name, repeat it to them. You want to make a good first impression. So things like that were instilled in me in that job as a caddy. And not only that, but you are responsible. You feel responsible for somebody else's clubs, right? For how they score that day. You're an extension of that person. So I took that kind of ideology to my career when I ultimately got a job out of college. And every day I think of myself as, I'm not operating rogue. I'm a representative of the company that I work for. And so it's important that you always put your best face forward, that you are as buttoned up and prepared as possible. And I'm 15 years into my career now, and the thing I've learned is what separates the average worker from the high performers, the top performers, is preparation and attention to detail. And I'll touch on that more as we continue the conversation.
Sure. So it sounds like when it comes to internships and part-time jobs, they're all different types and they come from different places. We'll take just a quick moment here. Any advice for the students who are listening here with us now and who will listen in the future on some of the early places they may look for internships or part-time summer jobs?
Yeah. So as an example, if you know that you are interested in business or you're interested in sales, right? You want to make a lot of money. A lot of those lot of money type jobs are partial salary, partial commission based. And so for you to be a performer in those types of atmospheres, you need some training on how to interact through that lens. And so my advice to people is you should always do something, whether it's an internship, try it for a year, whatever, do something that puts you in front of customers, right? So that you can really understand what it means to service a customer, to be responsible for a response to that customer, to make sure they're happy. And so whether that means working in a restaurant as a busboy or a server or a bartender, or working at a retail store where you're dealing with the cash register and people who are upset want to make a return, whatever. Jobs and internships that put you across from the customer, where you have to interact with them face to face or through email or on the phone, all of that is really good training for when you enter the workforce. For people that don't have that type of exposure and you don't have the person-to-person interaction, I see people struggle all the time if they don't have that background. So I'd encourage you, as you're thinking about internships or a first job or strengthening your skills in one way or another, customer-facing roles, I think, they build a thick skin, first of all, but second of all, it lets you empathize with the customer when you get into a different kind of role.
So that is your internship and part-time job discussion advice. Let's now move towards you graduate from Monmouth. And we'll go back and talk about Monmouth experiences here in a little
Sure.
while, but tell us about that first job out of college. Where did it come from? What did you do? What did you learn from it?
Sure. So my first job out of college was working for a medical education company in South Jersey in a town called Haddonfield. I think they're still in business today. It's a company called Robert Michael Educational Institute. So what that company did was they partner with major organizations, healthcare organizations. An example would be like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And the purpose of this organization was to put on dinners and put on events for doctors who specialize in a very specific type of medicine. And the idea was that we would hire these experts, best in the field at whatever the illness was or whatever the disease or the treatment was, bring them to a location, let's say, a Morton Steakhouse in New York City, or a restaurant in Las Vegas or Miami or whatever it might be. And what we would do is we'd hold these events called symposiums, where medical doctors could gain continuing education credits. And my job was to set up those events on behalf of the company. And so my job would be recruiting and getting signatures from doctors who would attend, trying to find the keynote, the expert in the field who would do the speech, and then manage all of the event setup. So, banquet rentals with whatever restaurant we were going to do the work at, coordinating the travel of the doctors and the speakers who were coming into that city for the symposium, and then sending the results of those sessions and the doctors that got the continuing education credits, the proper paperwork. Mostly an administrative job. I'll be very frank, that first job out of college doesn't wow you, right? I think my first job, my salary out of school was maybe 35 grand a year. So not gonna make you rich, but it makes you understand the types of things that you will have to know in the workforce, the types of terminology and slang, and working with programs that you've never seen before, like customer relationship management or CRM tools, things that are very popular today, like Salesforce or HubSpot, NetSuite, things like that. So this job, if you're asking me whether I was passionate or whether I even cared much about the job, the answer is definitely no, right? It was a paycheck, it was a job. But I knew that I wasn't going to do that forever, but that was a job that I had applied to, I think, during the spring of my senior year. I got an offer to start, I think, June 1st or June 2nd. So I maybe had 10 days between the time I graduated and when I started that job. One of the big customers of ours at that company was GlaxoSmithKline, a major pharma company. And GSK was working on an over-the-counter drug that was supposed to cure the common cold. And this drug was in FDA trials. Stage 1, drug's looking good, the results are great. Stage 2, same deal. Stage 3, the drug trials bomb overnight. On that Monday morning, GSK, the news leaks that the new drug is not going to be a success, not going to be approved. GSK's stock price falls by about 30% that week. GlaxoSmithKline was my company's biggest sponsor. Maybe 60 or 70% of our revenue came from GlaxoSmithKline. As soon as Glaxo's stock price drops, they immediately make the decision to cut their funding for these types of programs. And that Friday, less than a week after this news dropped, my company let go about 30% of its workforce. Guess who was included in that 30%? The real world, chewed me up and spit me out in less than a year. And that's just the reality of it. Sometimes our parents, a lot of our parents, I know my parents as an example, stay at the same job their whole career. They work at the same place 20, 30, 40 years. That's not common at all anymore. The folks that are my age typically change not change careers, but change companies every few years, 4 to 6 years on average. I even have friends that have done that more often, every year, every 2 years. And that's just to give yourself new experience, take on a new role, earn yourself more money, etc. So around that time, when I got laid off by that first employer, it was, I think, April of that year. I did not know what was next. Started applying to jobs kind of blindly. Anything related to business within an hour drive, I was interested in. And while I was applying and didn't have that next thing lined up, I went back to what I did during my summer years. I was caddying. Same place that I always worked. I called up my old boss, said that I was looking for some work. And because I showed up every day and I was always prepared, I never called out sick, I didn't no show, he was willing to take me back on as an employee. So, that job was a perfect bridge to the real offer that I got that really started my sustainability career. And there was a startup company in Trenton, New Jersey around that time. This is like spring of 2009, called TerraCycle. Some of you may have heard of that company. TerraCycle at that time in 2009 was a very small startup. They had less than 20 employees, and they were doing about $2 million a year in revenue. The CEO of the company was a Princeton dropout who won a science competition, got a grant, and started this business. And so very much a shoestring operation. You could wear whatever you want to work. Certain people had their dogs sitting next to their desk in the office. Not your typical office space at all. Very different than my first job. Again, I think my salary at that job starting was maybe 35 grand, 38 grand, something like that. And I was thrown into it because this place was a startup. I was hired as an account manager, managing the accounts of the biggest customers that TerraCycle had. So TerraCycle is a recycling and waste management company, mostly for plastics. And so our biggest customers were household names like Frito-Lay, Kraft Foods, Nabisco Cookies, Mars Candy, Kimberly-Clark personal care products, Procter & Gamble products, you name it. And so at 23 years old, I was an account manager for some of these major companies. So I'm interfacing with the director of marketing at PepsiCo at age 23, the director of procurement at Mars Candy at age 23, and really learning on the job as I went. I'll be honest, I was very green in that first job. Had to ask my supervisor for help all the time. But that was welcome because this was a startup company and it was expected that there's no playbook. Nobody has a playbook that they're going to hand you and say, here's how you do your job, right? It was a startup, so we were figuring it out as we went. And sometimes I think that can be the best teacher. You can prepare all you want, but at the end of the day, it's a sink or swim operation. Sometimes you get thrown into the deep end, you figure it out as you go. And then over a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year career, you learn from some of the mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But it was the wild, wild west at that company when I started in 2009, a couple $1 million a year in revenue. And by the time I left in 2021, it was about a $75 million company. So I was there for the hockey stick style growth, which positioned me for the role that I'm in now.
Pretty massive growth over the period you were there. Before we leave that first job where they laid off 30% of the company, look, this is a reality in the professional world. You know that, I know that. We have friends, maybe family members who've experienced that. You've experienced it. What does that feel like? I mean, that's not something that we can easily teach in the business school to the students, but you experienced it. What does it feel like to get that note hey, just so you know, no more job.
Yep. Let's put it this way. Many of you, or hopefully some of you in class, have gotten financial aid from Monmouth to be able to be at Monmouth, right? This would be like Monmouth telling you, we're going to give you financial aid. Here's what you can expect for this year. And then one day your invoice comes and you didn't get the aid that you thought. Now you've got to come up with that money to be able to continue your career. It's the same thing when you get laid off from a position, right? The bills don't stop coming. If you have a car, your car payment is still due first of the month. Car insurance due first of the month. Your cell phone bill. If you have your own apartment, if you're paying for utilities, right? The bills do not stop coming. And so there's a feeling of helplessness when you get laid off because sometimes it's no fault of your own. That's why they call it laying you off. You're not getting fired. You're getting laid off because the company's not meeting its financial goals. They have to answer to shareholders, whatever it might be. Lots of reasons why people reduce workforce and people get laid off, but it hurts. There's no way around it. And many times people are not prepared to immediately start sending out resumes the next day. And so if you ever hear the term keep your resume ready or get your resume ready, it's because things can turn on the stop of a dime in the business world. And, you know, if you have to spend a week after you get laid off getting your resume together and then starting to scout jobs and send your resume out, you could go 2, 3, 4, even 6 months until you get that new job. The interview process for anything new does not happen quickly. You might have a first interview this week and then you don't hear anything back for a couple of weeks. From the time you get a first interview to when an offer letter comes could be 6 weeks, could be 10 weeks, right? So think about that. Those every 2 weeks, you're not getting that paycheck when you got laid off. And so the biggest lesson that I've learned from this is the rainy day fund, saving money and keeping it in an account is real. It's very important. They try to tell you to have 6 months of what you would earn in a year saved up in case you lose your job, right? In case you need to continue paying your mortgage or your bills. But the reality is most Americans don't even have $1,000 in their account if their car goes out of whack tomorrow. And so, we all have Instagram, Facebook, etc. And you're watching everybody else's lifestyle out there. And a lot of today's world is about trying to keep up, feeling like you're showing off, right? At the end of the day, the making sure that you have a safety net is critical because every now and then, most people I know will get stuck out there once or twice in their life for no fault of their own. And if you don't have that safety net, it's a very rocky road. You don't want to have to be asking your family or your friends to borrow money. It starts a very bad spiral. So unfortunately, college is one of the places that does not teach you things like personal finance. And you find out, the hard way, how to make a budget, how to manage your money, how credit cards can be evil if you're not using them and paying them off quickly. Those are all things that you learn quickly when you end up being let go.
And so let's move on to something a little bit happier then. On to your work at TerraCycle. So you
Sure.
you just told us about how you got there and some of the early things you did, but you were there for a long time. So maybe take us along that larger career path from when you started to ultimately where you ended with the company.
Sure. When I started, I didn't know anything about recycling or about plastics or about how packaging was made or how products are manufactured. But what I did know is that I was very organized. I was a detail-oriented person. I knew how to work PowerPoint, Excel, those kinds of tools very well. I was a fast and accurate typer. Things like that you take for granted sometimes can give you a heads up in the business world. And so when I was at a small company, 20 some employees, if your work ethic is good and the quality of work that you put out, you rise to the top, you get noticed. And so as the company grew and started gaining some momentum, I was given some opportunities to grow with the company. So I started as that account manager that I was talking about. And over the next 5, 6 years that I was there, I think I was promoted 3 times in the first 5 or 6 years. And then around year 6, a completely different opportunity at the same company opened up. I was always on the front end of the business, facing customers, managing the account. and an opportunity came up to manage the back end supply chain of the business. Came with a lot more money, a lot more responsibility, and truth be told, I knew that I was going to have to learn on the job. Nobody again was going to hand me a playbook. So there's sometimes when that happens where, you know, you may not be totally comfortable taking on the new task or jumping a level of responsibility, but you have to take those risks in your professional career if you want to get to the next level. I work with many people today that are very comfortable doing the job that they do. They don't want to manage people below them, but that means that they're going to be capped on how much they can earn, what opportunities are going to be presented to them, et cetera. So at TerraCycle, I was given opportunities along the way to manage different projects as we grew. That those promotions came with salary increases, right? Could be a $5,000 increase one year or a $12,000 increase the next year. But as I got into my late 20s, I was gradually climbing the ladder in terms of what my title said, what my responsibility at the company was, how many people worked under me, and ultimately what my book of business was worth. But when I got the opportunity to work on the back end of the business in the procurement side, the supply chain management side of the business, I jumped at the chance because I knew that I liked where I worked, but I didn't love the day-to-day job that I had, and it got progressively more frustrating as, you know, good work begets more work. If you do a good job at something, your boss is going to notice and he's going to drop more on your plate. The people that keep the same level of work are the people that end up skating by. They're not going to get the same opportunities. And when I got that opportunity to be more on the back end of the business, I knew that I didn't have the technical knowledge that I needed to be successful in this role. And so I sought out a mentor. I worked with a really nice older Jamaican gentleman who worked at TerraCycle, who I befriended. He was 30 or 35 years my senior, gentleman by the name of Ernie Simpson, who I think may still be at TerraCycle. But he was the chief R&D guy, understood everything there was to know about plastic and polymers and recycling equipment and technology, and he had his finger on the pulse of new developments in the industry, mergers and acquisitions, which companies buying which. And I stuck to that guy like glue for about the first 18 months that I was in that new role. You know, hey, Ernie, what are you doing for lunch today? Trying to pick his brain whenever I could, right? Just so that I could have more tools in my toolbox to be able to do my job. And from maybe 2015 through 2021, I was in that same role on the back end of our company. And as you can imagine, TerraCycle is now doing 25 million a year, 40 million a year, 50 million a year. And by the time I left, 75 million a year. I was a vice president of that company. By the time that I left, I was reporting directly to the CEO and founder. That guy that I mentioned earlier that dropped out of Princeton, he was my boss. I interfaced with him every day, multiple times a day, and became that trusted advisor, one of the guys that he relied on to make his business run, give him the you know, not what he wants to hear, but give him the reality of the situation. And that's what I attribute some of my success to, is just my honesty, my ability to communicate in writing, in verbally, in person, whatever it may be. And the biggest thing that I also learned during that time and jumping positions is, I touched on it earlier, but you will get thrown into situations where you're uncomfortable. My advice to you is get comfortable being uncomfortable, because sometimes that's what it takes for you to realize, you know, how the world works around you and the role that you're working in, what you need to be doing, and you know, what you're responsible for delivering. So hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. Thank you for the response. Very thorough discussion of your progression there at TerraCycle. Maybe just for a minute or two, tell us about what TerraCycle was doing during those years. So you've done an excellent job telling us about what you were doing and how you've progressed. What was the company doing? What was the actual work outcome?
Yeah, so TerraCycle is a bit of a unique company. I'll try to give you the short version of the company's growth and how they evolved. So when I mentioned that the CEO was a Princeton dropout, the business was formed as a fertilizer company. And so you may know, you know, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, there's very popular brands like called Scott's, for instance. They make all kinds of fertilizer products. TerraCycle was in that business early on, and what they wanted to do was create a very natural, 100% real fertilizer that people could put on their plants to be able to make them grow healthier. The best known natural fertilizer is worm casings or worm poop. And so the founder of TerraCycle actually started the business at Princeton by buying a giant worm gin. Think like those cylindrical cement trucks that spin on the road. A big worm gin that I think he bought 10,000 worms, put the worms in the worm gin, and he partnered with the dining services at Princeton University to take any expired food coming out of the cafeteria and fed all that food to the worm gin. The worms eat all that food, process it, and what comes out the other end? Their feces. Their feces happens to be extremely nutritious. It's like a natural compost. And so the original business model of TerraCycle was to bottle that stuff in used soda and water bottles, put a new label on it, and sell it at Home Depot and Lowe's. I did not work for TerraCycle during any of the years that it was doing this early work. But right before I joined, TerraCycle got sued by Scott's, the behemoth in that division. And so think of it like it's a David and Goliath kind of battle. TerraCycle made a great product, a very natural product that actually performed better than Scott's in some cases. But the packaging and the colors on the TerraCycle package looked a little too much like Scott's. Scott's sued TerraCycle. So this is, again, the big guy going after the little guy, trying to get them to, cease and desist, if any of you take business law, or to change its packaging in some way so that consumers would not get it confused with Scott's. That case settled out of court. TerraCycle agreed to sort of exit that business and exit the way it was operating, and pivoted their business model entirely. So instead of trying to take used soda bottles and use it as a package for worm poop, the new model of TerraCycle was to take post-consumer, or think of it as spent packaging from everyday products that you consume at home. So think about when you go to the grocery store, you may buy things like, I don't know, chip bags, candy wrappers, food packaging, personal care products, shampoo, conditioner. These are all products that are made of plastic, and depending on where you live, may not actually be accepted in your recycling bin. Our curbside collection programs for recycling only collect a select few types of plastic. And so much of the stuff that you buy, you end up having to throw in your garbage can because it's not technically recyclable. So TerraCycle's whole model was to run collection programs for those types of brands and their packaging. So, we would have sponsorships with Walmart, with Frito-Lay, with Mars Candy, all the biggest brands you can imagine. And consumers, everyday people like you and me, would consume their chip bags or their candy wrappers or their toothpaste tubes or whatever it was at home that they were finishing, and send that stuff back to TerraCycle in a box using a prepaid downloadable shipping label from our website. All of those costs, physically getting the boxes to us, the processing of the material once it came back, none of that was paid for by the consumer. So you and me had a free option to send back our products if we wanted to see that they got recycled. All the bills for this, the bills were paid for by the brands that manufacture the products. So TerraCycle made its money by Frito-Lay and Colgate and Mars Candy paying the bills for us to operate these return shipping programs, and paying the bill for us to recycle what we received. And so my job in the last 5-6 years at TerraCycle was managing that supply chain. So finding a subcontractor or finding a vendor that I could go to and say, hey, I have a truckload full of Capri Sun juice pouches. They are made of this type of plastic and this type of aluminum. I need you to reprocess them for me into a raw material. So if you think of if you can picture like what BBs in a BB gun would look like, small little plastic pellets, that's what a lot of the food packaging and beverage packaging and stuff like that would get turned into, these plastic pellets. And then those plastic pellets get sold back into the plastic marketplace to companies who make plastic things. So, if you have a kitchen trash can that's made of plastic, it's made by Rubbermaid, for instance, there's a chance that plastic has come from a post-consumer product like chip bags or candy wrappers. If any of you have parents or relatives that have a Trex or TimberTech deck on the back of their house, that's a material that I frequently sold recycled Capri Sun juice pouches into. All of these manufacturers that make things out of plastic, they want to be able to tell a good sustainability story. They don't want to keep buying virgin plastic from brand new oil. If they can use recycled material that has a unique story to it, that's marketable. So of course they want that. And so my job was to tell the story. Where did that product come from? What did it used to be? And sell that material into these customers. So I did that. I was at TerraCycle for 12 years total. 6 of the years I worked kind of brand facing on the front end of the business. And on the second half of my career, I was on the back half, supply chain management, procurement side of the business. And that's what I actually learned to like more. So I'm in a similar role now at Covanta, but the difference is when I started at TerraCycle, it was a $2 million business. When I left TerraCycle, it was a $75 million business. I'm now working for a $2 billion company, much bigger business. But I'm doing virtually the same thing for a bigger player, for a bigger fish in the sea.
A little bit of a different experience working for a $2 billion company, I'm sure. Before we say goodbye to TerraCycle, in those last couple of years when you were doing that plastic program, were there any specific highlights, any maybe award-winning programs that got put together?
Yeah, TerraCycle won lots of awards just because of its innovative nature and the fact that we were visible on many of our partners' packages. It was a very visible brand. If you walk up and down the aisles of a supermarket today and pick up a lot of products, whether it's a Colgate toothpaste tube or a Garnier shampoo bottle, a lot of these companies now have a TerraCycle logo on the back to say that you can send that in through TerraCycle. So we were used to getting a lot of press. We were used to winning a lot of awards. But I was fortunate enough to work on a program with Procter & Gamble, one of the biggest customers of TerraCycle back in the mid-teens, probably 2017, 2018, where we entered a partnership with Procter & Gamble. They make all kinds of shampoo, conditioner, body wash products, household cleaning products. But one of the brands that they own is Head & Shoulders, the shampoo company. And TerraCycle did a project with P&G whereby not only did they want to buy recycled plastic from us to turn into their shampoo bottles, but they wanted to buy recycled plastic with a story behind it. And so we started at TerraCycle this whole initiative to go work with organizations that are doing beach cleanups and ocean and river cleanups, because there's a lot of pollution of these plastics in those rivers and waterways, especially around Southeast Asia today. So we entered a partnership with all of these different nonprofit organizations that were actively collecting plastic from waterways, things that were littered there. And we managed the collection of it. We managed the processing of it into those new raw material pellets and sold that back to Procter & Gamble. They successfully launched both the Head & Shoulders and the Herbal Essences beach or ocean plastic bottles in Target and Walmart stores a couple of years back. And that program that we ran with them actually won an award called the Momentum for Change Award that was issued by the United Nations. So I was an award winner for that project because I was the lead project manager on that effort. Naturally, that gained us a lot of press as a business and really expanded our ability to sell other storied plastics to other customers. So again, I've been with my role in these types of unique supply chains, just for how uniquely sustainable they are. They make good reading material. They make for good stories. And so if you happen to, have some free time and you're interested in any of these other stories, I think you can Google my full name and TerraCycle, and you'll still see some of those different news articles and things for different projects that we did over the years. So if you're interested, that's something you can use to dive deeper into some of the other projects and stories and interviews that I was able to do. But that's just I was fortunate to be at TerraCycle. I'm not there anymore. It didn't end in the best of terms during the pandemic with work-life balance and things like that. But I learned invaluable lessons at TerraCycle. I was there for 12 years, which is unique these days. Not many people stay at a job that long. And ultimately it gave me all the tools that I needed to be successful in the role that I'm in now.
Thank you for that. It's nice to have a Monmouth University alumnus who is a United Nations award winner. That's pretty impressive. Thank you. To the extent that you're comfortable talking about it, maybe just a very brief insight for the students, the listeners, on when you knew it was time to move along.
Yeah, it's a great question. The nature of any job is that your boss, your company, they're going to try to squeeze every inch of productivity out of you that they can, every ounce of productivity out of you that they can. You're a person at the end of the day, right? You have a family, you need work-life balance, you need to have your outside work life. And I worked directly for the CEO of the business. So this is the guy that founded this company. He grew it from nothing into a $75 million business. The company is that guy's life. I am an employee. It's not my life. I just happen to work there. But during the pandemic, I used to travel quite a bit for work prior to the pandemic. Maybe 50% of the time I was on the road. And so when the pandemic hit and the world stopped and there was no more travel, I worked from home, the way kind of where I'm sitting now, right? I worked here all day. And because my boss and the CEO knew that nobody was traveling, he knew that everybody was at home. And so that meant if he's up, if he needs an answer to a question, he's calling me 6 a.m., 9 p.m., didn't matter. So for a while, dealt with it. I understand there's growing pains. Sometimes you need to bite the bullet, work late hours, might be weekends. It happens from time to time. But this was a situation where for 3 months, 4 months straight, I was regularly putting in 70, 80-hour weeks during the week. And then I'd still get phone calls on the weekend, Saturday morning, in bed with my girlfriend, being woken up by my boss who wants to grill me on something, right? Just got to the point where it was untenable. And I had asked for some space to be able to back off, let me reset a little bit. And ultimately that didn't happen. So it got to a breaking point where, it was not a good fit for either of us at the time. And I knew I needed to be elsewhere.
Work-life balance is incredibly important. And I think that's a good example of how that can play out in the professional world. But now, Covanta, you're with Covanta. Tell us a little bit about how you got there and what it is that you do.
So this goes back to my college days when I was and high school days and college days when I was caddying during the summer. It's who you know question, right? Relationships. That's how I got the job that I have now. When I was at TerraCycle, my job was to know who all of the players in my industry were, who surrounds me, who's making noise, right? Who's stealing our business, who's doing something innovative. And Covanta at the time was I would call them an indirect competitor of TerraCycle. There was some interest in Covanta purchasing TerraCycle at some point, and we had one of the Covanta presidents and one of the Covanta vice presidents visit TerraCycle while I worked there. I ran the meeting that we sat in, showed them a little bit about what we're working on. There was, maybe 5 or 6 other TerraCycle people in that meeting. But during that day, I impressed, apparently. I didn't learn this until years later, but when Covanta got into a mode where they were going to grow and invest in the business and expand their team, I was one of the first names that that president of Covanta's one division remembered. And so I remember getting a message on LinkedIn from this guy that hired me saying, hey, Covanta actually just got acquired by a Swedish private equity firm. And this private equity firm is trying to invest a lot of money, pump a lot of money into Covanta to make Covanta the one-stop shop for all waste. If you remember, I was talking about Covanta being a waste to energy business. We effectively burn waste to create steam energy in a closed loop manner. EQT, our parent company now, is pumping I think over $1.2 billion since 2021 into the company via acquisitions of other businesses. So we are buying other waste companies that complement Covanta's business by offering services that Covanta doesn't do on its own in-house. And when that announcement came out that Covanta was going to grow this whole other environmental services piece, my former boss, he now moved on to a different role, but the guy that hired me at Covanta reached out and said, hey, we're going to be growing this thing. I need somebody that has a lot of knowledge around recycling and composting and other ways of dealing with waste other than incineration for energy. And you were the first guy I thought of. And that's because of the relationship, my ability to be in a meeting and be prepared and show that I know what I'm talking about, that made my name and my face stick. And then when it came time for this company to expand, very rarely do companies start just putting out job postings. A lot of times it's, do you know a guy? Do you know a guy in this field who's an expert that can lead this thing? It's almost like a pocket listing for real estate. A lot of very wealthy people, when they're selling their houses, they don't use a normal realtor, right? There's like an inner circle of pocket listings where, it's sort of like word of mouth among the elite. And so in this role, the fact that Covanta was going to expand and hire a bunch of new people was not yet advertised. It was kind of like a pocket listing on LinkedIn where this guy said, hey, we're going to go build this. Not sure whether you're interested in doing this for the next 5 or 10 years, but we need a guy with your skill set. And I got invited in for an interview. I performed well on that interview. The parent company's up in Morristown, New Jersey. I work from home down in South Jersey where I live, but went up to Morristown, New Jersey for that interview. And within 3-4 days, I had a job offer that was it was befitting of a company of this size. I thought that I was doing well when I left TerraCycle, and I thought I'd be lucky to land a job that paid me what I was getting paid when I left TerraCycle. But the reality is, I didn't take the scale of the companies into account. Remember, I was working for a startup that grew to be a $75 million company. So they didn't really have the pay scale of the elite publicly traded kind of company. So when I got pulled into this role, I was very happy and surprised at the level of compensation in a buttoned up Fortune 500 style of business. And so in my current position, it's definitely a lot more professional of an organization. There's no wear whatever you want to work at a company like this. There's no dogs sitting next to desks, and we're back to the boring old walls and the cubicles and things like that in the office. But the benefit to working for a traditional style of company is that they take care of their employees. There really is some work-life balance, and there's some structure around how the business actually functions. So I'm in a position now where I'm very happy. I've been lucky to learn through the various roles that I've had. Some of those years were very tough. Some of those years I didn't know if I wanted to stay in environmental and sustainability. But at the end of the day, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can come in and help an organization with. And so the older I get, now that I'm in my mid-30s, I realize this is not a job anymore. This is my career. And you start realizing that it's not a job, it's a career when you start running out of hours in the day. I talked about this with my friends where when I was 23, 24 at my first job or two, I'm looking at the clock in the bottom right-hand corner of my computer. It's 3:55 p.m. I'm like, oh my God, will 5 o'clock get here? Now, when you have a career, you look down, you go, oh my God, it's 3:55. I got nothing done today. I can't believe the day's over. There's not enough time in the day. And that's when you realize it's not a job anymore. It's a career, because you're trying to, you have so many hours. There's a lot of things to get done, and you got to keep progressing through your checklist. So it's a very different type of experience now where I work, but a rewarding one for sure.
That is an excellent career path and very informative. I think the students can learn a lot from your professional trajectory. And speaking about the students learning a lot, I'd like to ask you, what is it that you learned here at the university? Are there any lessons or experiences from your undergraduate years that stand out as formative for your professional experience?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this PG for the time being, but the things I learned for sure in college that really benefit me today are how to treat people, right? You deal with all kinds of people in college, whether it's a professor, a custodian, fellow classmates, whatever it might be. And just like it is in college, it's the same way in your professional career. You're going to encounter people from all walks of life, right? All kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different skill sets. And you need to be patient. I preach patience, right? Not everybody thinks the way you do. Not everybody thinks that a company or a business or an idea should function the way that it does. But I'd say some healthy debate. If you're able to have a healthy debate and make your point, but also listen, things like that will help you significantly in your career. As far as memorable experiences from Monmouth, I will say I was a very active member of Sigma Pi fraternity when I was in school. I was the recruitment chairman for a few semesters. So during all of the pledging phases of new semesters, I was in charge of running the events and recruiting for Sigma Pi fraternity. That really gave me the experience to deal with those different types of people, be able to talk to them, be able to understand different viewpoints. At the end of the day, I was trying to convince folks to join our group, our fraternity, to be a Sigma Pi brother for the rest of their life. So the relationship piece was important. I remember, Greek Week as one of the, I'm not sure if anybody here is in Greek life, but the Greek Week events, in the spring semester were always incredible. Hanging out on the quad and on the Great Lawn and things like that, and doing the different events from keg toss to sports, from everything else. Those were the times of college where you just had the best time with your friends. You knew those moments weren't going to last forever, so you really cherished them while they were there. As far as I know, I'm actually getting married this December up in Oceanport at a new venue called Park Loft, not too far from Monmouth University. So I've been up in the area recently driving around. I've seen that some of my old haunts like Jack's are still not only there, but flourishing. And, those are places that I'll remember for the rest of my life.
That's fun. That's fun. There are some fraternity and sorority students who are on the list I see here. And as I'm looking at the list, actually, there's a lot of folks here who are with us who are getting ready to graduate and get out there in the professional world. And I thought maybe you'd spend maybe a minute or two just giving those students some advice. Give some advice for these folks who are actually, Brett, they are a few weeks now away from graduating. So it's coming up.
My best advice, if you have a month or a couple weeks or whatever it is, soak it in, number one. This is probably the last time in your life when you can really focus on what's ahead of you for the next couple weeks and not what's ahead of you for the rest of your life. So really enjoy that, because once you get into the workforce, it's a different level of responsibility, right? Your life is no longer structured in the way that it is at college, where you have classes and you need to go to the dining hall at whatever time, right? You make your own rules as an adult. So being able to manage your own time well, being able to manage your budget, your own personal finances, those are things that I'd really put an emphasis on. Nobody's going to hand you a playbook. So if you can start creating budgets or using tools that let you do that online now, it will really benefit you when you have your first job a couple months from now or a year from now or whatever it might be. So there are websites out there like Credit Karma and NerdWallet and things like that that can be really helpful in giving you what you need to know about personal finance and credit cards and doing all of that kind of stuff. But as you start to enter the workforce, the advice I would give you is, don't try to find the perfect job as your first job. What you really want is reliability and dependability, right? A company that you can learn something from, or go work for a person that you can leech some information from. The first job you have is probably not going to be your last. I can almost guarantee that. So just try to take learning experiences out of whatever you're going to do. I think my first job when I was out of college, you have a little bit of imposter syndrome the first couple of weeks, because you're sitting there like, I don't know any of these people, this software, this product. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But you kind of learn as you go. So get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you'll learn on the fly. You'll learn some lessons about what you could have done better next time. and then that next time will happen in a week, right? So you'll be able to, for the next 40 years of your career, take the lesson that you learned in your first week. But it's important to learn from mistakes. It's important to be prepared. One of the things that has helped me most in my professional career is being a diligent note taker for any conversation that I have, whether I'm in a meeting. I could be physically face to face across from you at a table, or on the phone with you, or jotting down a summary of a conversation when I finally get my hand to a pen and paper. But what will happen in your professional life is you will juggle multiple balls throughout the day, right? You'll work on a number of different projects, and you're not going to remember everything. So be the guy or the girl in your organization or in your crew that is dependable, that can tell you what happened in the last conversation, that can tell you what happened during the last call. That's a really valuable skill that not a lot of people, even in my career today, use. And it's a very simple one, right? Send yourself an email with a summary of what just happened on a conversation. So when things pick back up in 2-3 weeks, you can go back and oh, what did that guy say? Where did we leave it? Those things can be really helpful for you. They've really helped me in my career.
Thank you for that. And that'll bring us right here to the end, Brett. I appreciate you spending some time with us. One last comment for the students, before I turn it back over to you for a final parting word or two for everyone. For the students, if you are on the Hess Engage platform, you can log into your account. There will be a QR code there, and that will get you your attendance that you need for being here at the event. And so with that, Brett, if you have maybe a parting word of wisdom for the students, now might be the time for that.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank everybody for their attention tonight. I know it's a beautiful day. We'd all much rather be outside. So thank you for sitting in and listening. You're really in the prime of your lives right now. And for those of you that are seniors, really soak in these last couple of weeks, enjoy it, right? And a lot of the people that you're spending time with in the last couple of weeks will still be part of your life 15 years later. I'm an example of that. A lot of the guys I graduated with and was in a fraternity with were still very close. So enjoy your time at Monmouth, but take it seriously when you get out into the workforce. Preparedness really makes a difference. And I know that when I'm looking for people that I'm going to hire, I look for people that can answer questions for me before I've even asked them. They can anticipate things because they're prepared. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for giving back to Monmouth University. Thank you for giving back to the Leon Hess Business School. And thank you for being part of tonight's Alumni and Management series.
Thank you for having me.